Baruch Hashem, we get to begin the fifth Maimah of the hemshekh today, of ha-Shemini Atseret. Remember the Kviyas in Ranat was Shabbos Sunday, so Shemini Atzeret was over Shabbos, and the Maimah here is very much a hemshekh. Is very much a hemshekh to the Maimah of u-va-Yom. He's very much a hemshekh to u-va-Yom. So what we're in the middle of the second section of the hemshekh. Hemshekh is up in three sections. We've already said many times. The first two Maimorim is section 1. The next three Maimorim, the first two Maimorim, Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah, is section 1. Explains the concept of Makabel as it relates to the Medrash, which talks about Kaisos. The second section of the hemshekh is the three Maimorim, Shuvi Yisrael, u-va-Yom, ha-Shemini Atzeret. And that deals with explaining the inyan of Midas Hadin, why Hashem wanted to create the world Midas Hadin. And in that second section itself, it's split up into two sections. So section 2a, section 2b. Section 2a is Shuvi Yisrael, which explained that Midas Hadin would have created an authoritarian state of affairs where everything would have been very strict, and everyone would have been very aware of the Smola Elyon, the divine strictness, and that itself would have elicited in people a very sublime Avodas Hashem, but it also would have been a bit too much for them. And then the second section, section 2b, is u-va-Yom and ha-Shemini Atzeret. In u-va-Yom we began the alternative pshat in Midas Hadin. This alternative pshat is that creating the world Midas Hadin would have meant Hashem being mitzamtzim himself, an extreme tzimtzum, to enable there could be the creation of Yeshua Metzias, Dvarim Nifradim, separate entities, and when things are a separate entity, then they can be Mekabel Berotzein, Hashem's Malchus, and that is a real. Then there's a Tainug B'Melucha. The real Tainug B'Melucha, the real pleasure that Hashem gets out of being a king is when separate entities, Kavyachol, are able to Mekabel his Malchus. So in order that they should be separate, Hashem had to be Mitzamtzim himself. So we've been explaining that the Tzimtzum is not just in the Kalim, the Tzimtzum is in the Oy. So we started off by just saying the broad distinction between Eilam Atzilus and Eilam Esbiyah. The Eilam Atzilus is Eilam HaYichud, so Ha'arif from Hashem, whereas Eilam Esbiyah, Eilam is Nifradim. But then we went further to explain how it's Tafkin Malchus of Atzilus, where this transition occurs. The Levush Kavod Malchus, the Levushim of Malchus, the Isis Hadibur of Malchus, are what enable there to be the creation of Mitzvahs Nifradim. And that was a whole arichas about Dibur. The Dibur is a Helen Behester Legamri on the Eira Seichel, the Eira Midas. So similarly to the Isis Hadibur of Malchus are a Helen Behester on the Eira Atzilus, which facilitates the Hafrada and the Yeshus of Eilam Esbiyah. That was broadly speaking. Then we went a little bit deeper and we brought the pasuk Kavod Malchus Chiyemeru Vaski Daberu, which we're in the middle of discussing at the moment. That's what we're in the middle of. And the beginning of this mind is going to give a quick summary of where we're up to in what we were discussing about Kavod Malchus Chiyemeru Vaski Daberu, which was that the Tzimtzum is not just Benegea to the Oisius and the Kalim. It's not something the Oisius do to the Oir, but the Oir itself is Nistantim. The Tzimtzum is is in the Madregas HaOir as well. And that is what we're going to discuss to quite an extent till the Omid Samach Zayin, to the end of Samach Vav, this notion of Tzimtzumim in the Oir. Because once there's a Tzimtzum, then you can have Yeshus in the Oir. The Oir itself becomes much more B'chinas Yesh. Because till now we were talking about Oir, which was a Ha'ara. Ora, which is Dovuk and Aftus and all these things. But we're going to be much more nuanced now in our discussion of the Oir. The Oir, the Gabi, the Madrega Shalamata Mimenu, the Oir, the Gabi, the Kalim is Poshet. Yeah, Pshit is the Oir. But once you start looking at the Oir, the Gabi, the Maila, the Madrega Shalamaila Mimenu, then it's all of a sudden B'chinas Yesh. The Fierich, the Madrega is higher than it. And it goes like this to all the Madrigas. So we're going to get much deeper into that sugya about how through tzimtzumim, and not just, we don't just look at it as Oir is Oir Poshut and is Agilu of Elikus, and then you have Kalim and you have all these other things which are Magbil the Oir. That's a too simplistic way of looking at it. The reality is that there's tzimtzumim in the Oir itself. And that creates the dynamic in which the Oir is able to be mislavish into the Kalim and be Ne'elam and Nistak, become completely concealed in that Kalim. But the Oir itself has to do some work in order to facilitate that there can be this interaction, this engagement. Good. Let's just do the introductory paragraph and then introductory 2 paragraphs, and then I'll explain to you how something happens a little bit funny in the structure of the beginning of this Maimon. So ready, top of Amud, beginning of Amud Nun Ches. u-va-Yom ha-Shemini Atseret tiyeh lachem. So on the 8th day of the Chag, after the 7 days of Sukkot, Atseret tiyeh lachem, it should be a day of Atzeret. So Atzeret can mean a day of assembly, a day of gathering. In the Atzeret uloshen klita. When we say Atzeret, we mean the idea of something becoming gathered and contained, held together. So in the
concentrated.
In the Pashta Pshat, Atzeret just means it'll be a day of gathering. Yeah, but here we're emphasizing this the fundamental etymology of Atzeret, that is the idea of gathering together, and that negated the Pirush HaPnimi of Shmini Atzeret is Shenetzav v'niklot b'neshamas Yisrael kol ha'oros v'agiluyim shenimshachim b'Rosh Hashanah v'Yom HaKippurim. That on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur there's hemshechs, there's Gilu Elikus, but it's in a Bechinas Makiv, and it's even prior to Bechinas Makiv in some ways. And on Shmini Atzeret, those oros are able to be nimshach in a pnimius in the Shamas Yisrael. So he may even b'Chag Sukkos b'Bechinas Makiv. When it comes to Chag Sukkos, you have the Sukkah b'Bechinas Makiv. B'Shmini Atzeret nimshach b'Bechinas pnimius, b'Zo Atzeret tiyeh lachem. Sheyumshach lachem b'Pnimius in the Shamas Yisrael. So that's the whole concept of Shmini Atzeret, that you should be mamshich in a pnimius all of the Giluyim, the hemshechs, which were from Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Okay, standard explanation of Pichsidus of the Seder of the Moedos, the Seder of the Yom Tovim of Tishrei. So he says, "When Bishmini Atzeret as Eisin Simchas Torah." So it says in Shulchan Aruch. So this is the lashon Shmini Atzeret. You do Simchas Torah. The celebration of the completion of the Torah is on Shmini Atzeret. V'yasimcha ala Torah shnita b'Yom HaKippurim. So this simcha is the simcha for the Torah that was given on Yom Kippur. So the Luchos Shniyos, which were given on Yom Kippur, we celebrate them on Simchas Torah, which is on Shmini Atzeret. But we seemingly need to understand why don't we make Simchas Torah on Yud Aleph Tishrei straight away? Why do we have this hemshekh of Sukkos, and Dafka after Sukkos when it's Shmini Atzeret, then we do Simchas Torah? First of all, why don't we do it immediately? If we're not doing it immediately, why Dafka on Shmini Atzeret? What is the connection between Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah? 2 questions, yeah? Again, there's no siyum of this maimah. These questions are not answered.
Of course.
Yeah,
In the further moment, do the questions get answered?
Hmm?
In the later moment, do the questions get answered?
No. First of all, there's not really a...
Which one of our questions have been answered so far?
No.
In
the beginning of the
the first time it didn't. Maybe there's an exception that makes the rule.
Shuvah it's mentioned, yeah. Shuvah did. Shuvah Yisrael had to see him. Yom Rosh Hashanah, no. Then Yechinim Yamayim. There was a discussion about Yechinim Yamayim. Towards the end, yeah. There was a biur. I was born of it. It's good to know what happened. That's the end of our questions. Now we're going to do the recap of where we're up to. So to understand all of this, we first need to reintroduce what we explained above in the previous Maim in Lulav the Inyan Kavod Malchus regarding the pasuk from Tilim, which we say in Ashrei, Kavod Malchus Yemeru Ugvaraski Dabeir. So we explained. What does Kavod Malchus mean? The Kavod Malchus ubechinas halavush de Malchus. Kavod is a lavush. Is synonymous with the idea of a lavush. And we say Kavod Malchus, we mean the lavush of your Malchus. And what is the lavush of your Malchus? And bechinas Eisis Adibur. Eisis Adibur are lavush. Why they lavush? Because it becomes enclosed in them the Eiris Al Yonim. Sheheim bechinas yesh. Those Eisis Adibur of Malchus are in a state of yeshus. How do they? And because they're a state of yeshus, nasim bechinas lavush master, that enables them to be able to hide and conceal the Eiris of Atzilus, and that enables there should be the creation of Elamis Biyah. That's how Taki the Eibusha can be a Melech. Alam. But with the pasuk continues, how on earth do the Eisis of Malchus become in a state of Yeshus? I know the Sibus Yeshus are Eisis, who alidei hagvuris is because of the Tzimtzum in the Eir. Mashenimshach Eir Matzumtzum b'Malchus. That the Eir which is being nishtalshul is itself Matzumtzum, which then enables the emergence of Eisis in a state of Yeshus. Because calls man that the Eir is not Matzumtzum, the Eisis are Beheda Yeshus, the Eisis are much more bottle. But by the Tzimtzum in the Eir, it enables the emergence of Eisis in a state of Yeshus. Which then, being a Yesh, means that they're able to conceal the Eir of Atzilus. Here it says E-Efsha, but it most likely should be Efsha. Through this, it's possible for there to be the creation of Biyah, such that Biyah will be in a real state of Yeshus and a real state of Gvul, a real state of separateness. Okay, so that's our summary. So now it goes further and he says, so this, what we've just said above, that for there to be the creation of Biyah, then there needs to be Gvuris for Tzimtzumim in the Eir, such that the Malchus Vatzila is able to be Mailim or Mastim on the Eir, and can then create Biyah. The same principle applies if you go higher. If you consider the emergence of Elam Atzilus, and you keep going higher, the same pattern and interaction of Eiris and Kalim and Asis applies. To sort of create this hishtalshlus, to move everything along, such that you can get to the next madrega. What there needs to be is simtsumim in the Eir. Shaygama atzilus, v'gam b'mashalam ma'ila mi'atzilus, hariyim gam kim b'chinas yesh l'gabi Eirin seif. It's all relative. Eilam is b'yai b'chinas yesh l'gabi atzilus. Malchus, the Eisis had dibur Malchus, Kavod Malchus, the Eisis had dibur of Malchus b'chinas yesh l'gabi the Eiris of Zah. But Atzilus itself is also b'chinas yesh l'gabi the Eish l'mayla me'atzilus, and the Eilam Eish l'mayla me'atzilus, Ak, Akudin, are also b'chinas yesh l'gabi Einos Eish l'fnei atzimus. So we're now going to elaborate and explain in more detail what it means for these madreigs to be b'chinas yesh. And that takes us into a Gor Tifa Gedichte Sugya. Talk about Yichud Elo, Yichud Tatot, Das Elin, Das Taftin, and Kav, and Yesh Ein Yesh. All very involved shtickle now for quite a few pages. And I just want you to. The way I'm gonna read this is I think there's a sort of a big bracket in the middle over here. And it's good to just in the structure, how you're thinking about what it's saying over here, is to first read the sentence, and then we'll read the bracket in between the sentence. So the sentence starts at the beginning of the next paragraph, and he says, "V'loi zu bilvad shehakelim heim b'chinas yesh." It's not just when we talk about the yeshus, say about Atzilus, legabi l'mayla me'atzilus, legabi Ein Sof, that the kelim are b'chinas yesh. Skip to Amud Nun Tes, the beginning of the next paragraph. Hukmei Kain. This is the continuation of that sentence. It has a vav there, which complicates it a bit more for the way I'm trying to read it. But imagine there's no vav there. Hukmei Kain yuvan bebechinas ha'oir shela eses firis ta'atzilus ulamayla me'atzilus. Da'aynu bechinas oir hakav ha'nimshekh la'acha ha'tzimtzum shegam hu bebechinas yesh. Vis ha'vusoi hu al yedei hatzimtzum liyos mi'ayni yesh chuli. So it's not just the kelim of bechinas yesh, but similarly to also the oir of the eses firis of Atzilus and the oir hakav are also bechinas yesh. And their yeshus, just like their yeshus is facilitated because of earlier tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is what enables there to be yesh. So we, till now, in the Lulav Rava, we were talking about what yesh were we talking about? We're talking about the yeshus of biyah. Now, we're saying that everything is fundamentally a yesh, in contrast to the ayin ha'amiti, Begabi Elikus, Begabi Atmos Ein Sof. Everything to an extent becomes a yesh, because it emerges as something other than it. If we're talking about it, then it has a form of yeshus. How does that yeshus come about? That comes about from Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum enables that. Okay.
The log's not really a problem. Because he's not seeing it as a bracket, he sees it as a point which is
just the way I'm reading it, if you read it with a vav, it sounds
it
doesn't fit in, it's not grammatically correct. But
because it's not literally a bracket, it's just a tangent to explain the first
right.
part.
So the rest of the shir we're going to do the bracket, right? That's what we're going to do today, what I consider the bracket. I just wanted you to know what we're about to...
And why does that matter to us? Of course, everything's yes.
No, so what we're about to embark on, as I was saying, this is the main emphasis of the Maimah going forward is to explain how the Oir is also the Bechinas Yesh. And why is the Oir the Bechinas Yesh? Our whole thing was, how is it Kaved Malchus Chayimeiru? Because of Gvaras Chidabeinu. You can apply that to everything. Why is the Oir all the Kelim of Atzilus and all the Eiros of Atzilus Bechinas Yesh? Because of Gvaras Chidabeinu. Because of the Tzimtzumim.
Right.
So, and we're going to get to the fundamental core point of all this. What is the core point of all this? That there's two ways in which the Eibishter Atmos Ein Sof is expressed. Is expressed. One is more fundamental, one is more primary, and one is secondary. The primary way is for something to be in a sense, a carbon copy. What's a carbon copy? It's an identical copy of the thing. But it's a copy. When I say the word copy, I mean it's separate. It's a separate copy. See, the thing itself, what is the thing itself? What is the Eibishter? What is the quality of the Eibishter that is fundamental? Like the Rambam says clearly, that he is independent. Nothing makes the Eibishter, nothing comes before it. Nothing comes before the Eibishter. The Eibishter is Makori, he's authentic, he's original. Yeah? And he's independent. He's not reliant on anything else. Dependent, is self-sustaining, and is separate from everything else. So, what mirrors that? What is a carbon copy of that? So the word, the thing that we use, the term that we use. So to describe that is oisius. Oisius, a letter is seen as something which is like a doinim. So it's our way of using a doinim. Why we use the moshel of oisius is because of all the milos that we have here with dibur and stuff, and that we're using. But think about it, what the component, something which is a makabel at any level. And this goes back to the earlier parts of the Maimorim, the early part of the hemshekh. All these things, the oisius, the kalim, the makablim, whatever they are, the core feature of them is that they are independent. And they're self-sufficient. They're not dependent on other things. Now, in some ways, you could say it's a dova gashmi.
The Oisius?
Yeah.
Okay. Ha-Shemini then, relying on Hashem.
I didn't say they come from everything from Hashem. What are their qualities? How do they reflect the elikus? So there is a quality of elikus. There's a quality of elikus which is an inyan atzmi. To be an atzmi, to be like an essential thing, an independent thing. The things that are separate from Hashem, created in a manner of separateness, yeah, they are much more closely associated with the atmos of Hashem. So a Dova Gashmi, ostensibly the Dova Gashmi is self-sustaining. It's independent of other things to exist. It doesn't rely on anything else to exist. It's stable. That's the notion of a makabel as well. A makabel is something that's stable. It's not a mashpia. The mashpia is desperate to share something that it wants to convey. The makabel is dormant. It's not... usually, oftentimes, you think of a makabel as something which is deficient. Right? So it needs something. Who's needy in the mashpia makabel relationship? The makabel is needy. Not the mashpia. The mashpia has what he has. But here we're stressing a different point. The mashpia is really the needy one. The mashpia needs to share. Whereas the makabel is dormant, is stable. I am as I am. You want to be mashpia on me? Fine. No one asked you. And as we explained in the first Maimon, the reason why the mashpia wants to be mashpia to the makabel is because he realizes the makabel has got a deeper deher and a deeper relationship with Elokus. That's being in a state, being a makabel, being a Dova Gashmi, all these things that we've been learning in Tanya at the moment, in Kunjas Achron. The Dova Gashmi reflects, in Simon Chof, to create the yesh, to create metzias, is something which harks back to the very essence of Hashem. Because he's the only real metzias. For somebody to be a metzias, and a metzias a metzias nivra, only the metzias beira can do that. And that was the whole... So that's one aspect of Elokus. And then you have the other aspect which is called Gilui. What is Gilui? Gilui is a ha'ara, like we said. And this ha'ara is trying to convey and share fundamental truths about Elokus, about Atzmos Ein Sof. What truths? There's nothing else besides the Eibishter. Hu levadei hu. That's Oir's objective. Oir is bottle el amoir, Dovuk al Amoir, and he wants to tell everyone what this Moir is. This Moir is everything. That's its objective. So, in the context of Oir, the existence of Oisius is a shtickler stira to it. Because the whole point of Oisius is something which is a davar nifrat. And Oir is all about there being only the Eibishter. So Kozman, the Oir is dominant, is present, is overwhelming the situation. Even though shum gilu Oir beli Oisius, it's not that the Oisius aren't there, but in the equilibrium between the Oir and the Kalim, the Oir and the Oisius, and the Oir is dominant. Oir is like we have in the Yitzchayim, the Oir in Sof was Mamalik Kol Mokum Achalol. And there was Matthias Oisius were not even Nicker. Just like we said in the Moshel, we said in the last Maimah, in a person, the Oisius are not Nicker, in Chochma, not Nicker, in Etzema Nefesh. The head of Matthias. It's not that they're not there. So they're dominated, the Oir dominates the narrative. The narrative is all about being Megala, the Achdus, and the Vereinzigkeit of the Eibishter. So comes along thoughts that how do we move things along? How do we enable there to be the emergence of Devarim Nefrodim? If you just leave it to the Oir, if you leave the Oir in place, it will never be possible for this other aspect of Elikus, which is not only another aspect of Elikus, but actually is a tifra aspect of Elikus, because it mamish reflects Elikus. It mamish reflects the Eibishter. It's not like the Oir, which is only a ha'ara. It's not substantially the same thing as Atzeret and Seif, whereas the Keach HaGvul, the Oisius, the Kalim, the Mokir in Atzeret and Seif is in mamish Atzeret and Seif. But it hasn't got any space or to express itself. So there needs to be a tzimtzum. What is this tzimtzum? The tzimtzum in the Oir is to restrain the dominance of the Oir. Now, what does it mean? Not literally.
Saying although the Oir appreciates the mile of the Keli, it can't.
It doesn't appreciate the mind of
It
the
doesn't appreciate that.
No. It's actually lachatchila mitzad atzmei. It's a stira to it. Kol in Oir is legal, is to be megala the Moir.
So it's not that it's just too limited to be able to make space for something which is deeper than itself. It doesn't even know that it should be doing such a thing.
It's mukbul in the gather of Oir. That's what Oir is. So,
Can't appreciate Keli. Can't appreciate Keli and therefore move itself to the side.
right. Figuratively.
Yeah.
Like Kipshuti. So the Kudah, when we talk about Tzimtzumim, the Tzimtzum Oir has to happen from the beginning, that this Oir has to be Nischanach. What's the Tzimtzum in the Oir? The Tzimtzum in the Oir is a chinuch in the Oir. You're Pasha teaching the Oir that the Tachlis HaKavana is not Oir. Oir, mitzad atzmoi, thinks the Tachlis HaKavana is to be Megalis Amoy. But the Oir has to be Nischanach, that the Ikka Kavana is there should be a Yesh V'dov Nifred Laganri. In order to be Memala Kavana Elyono, the Kavanas Atzmas, there needs to be a Yesh V'dov Nifred. So the Oir now has to be Metzamtim as Atzmi. You could say, if that's the whole Kavana, get rid of the Oir Laganri. Who needs Oir? Just have Oisius, just have Kalim. As you see, we can't have one without the other. Each one is necessary to get to the end stage we're going to get to, which is going to be part of what we're going to be explaining in this Maimah about what is that relationship, the relationship between the Oir Abli Gvul and the Keach HaGvul, the Oisius, the Kalim, etc. Okay, so that's the context. When we say Tzimtzum in the Oir, we're not talking about dimming the light. The problem that Oir has is not in its, on one hand, it is its intensity, but its fundamental objective of the oil is bestira to the kavanah of the kelim, the kavanah of the oisius, the kavanah of the keich hagvul, which is the kavanah sa'atzmus. So the oil has to be trained to allow for the emergence of this keich hagvul. Verstehst? Okay, that's the context of what we're
So
doing.
the urge sees the same as was previously.
Even the Lashon Atseret, the Atseret says the concept of tzimtzum shleiki pshutai is not just. We even mean that when we say we're just talking about Eir and Seif, and we're not talking about Silik, we're talking about Helam. What do we mean by Helam? We don't literally mean Helam. We mean moving Mailim, this notion, this your Mailim on the Eir, this Tenor, this perspective. That is the kavan. That everything is about being megala the ma'od in a tenor of oil, in a tenor of dvekus. Really, the whole point is to allow for the emergence of dvarim nifradim, and that is the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is that's what it's trying to achieve in the tzimtzum. Okay.
So how does the urge no longer be overpowering? Surely, if the urge is still there, then perhaps it appreciates that it should let the keli be there.
It serves a different function now. As you're going to see, the oil is now a means by which just like we had with all of our mashalim in the first Maimorim, you can't have dibur if you don't have seichel. Seichel is the oil, right? The whole kavan is the oisis hadibur.
Yeah.
They are mushrush and atzmus. They're the ikka. But you're not going to be megala, the shodish ha'isiyas, if you don't have seichel. You're just going to talk gibberish. You're not going to be megala, the maila of the isha, of the makabel, in etzma nefesh, to be able to create a new child, if you don't have a father. It's just not going to happen. Because Eina begeder, the Lashon in Yichayim Yamayim was Eina begeder pu'ula lifa. The problem with the makabel and all these things, not like the Eibishter. The Eibishter is independent, but the Eibishter is a kol yachol. The independent things that we're talking about are doimimim. They're inanimate. They're inactive. They're so stable. They're completely disinterested in anything other than themselves. That's yeshus. It's complete self-absorption. But that's not the kavanah. The kavanah is to have a yeshud of a nifrat, which is able to be megala shirish shasha u'mekeirei. So you need the oil in order to facilitate that. So the oil hasn't changed. The oil realizes it has to be megala atmosphere and safe. It just understands now there's a tifra inyan in atmosphere and safe than what it thought there was.
So before it was preaching wire, and now it's still just preaching wire.
Before it was preaching the fact that the Eibishter is hu levado u-va-Yom zulase. And now it's preaching that the Eibishter is able to be a davar nifrat too.
That switch allows for the emergence of keli.
And that's how the Eibush is. That is how the Eibush is hu levado ve-Ein zulase. It's not hu levado ve-Ein zulase because nothing else exists. It's that everything else that exists is the Eibush. It can be megala that nakuda. It's a tifra inyan elakus that the Eibush is able to be a yesh v'davar nifrat b'fnei atzmi. Hu levado b'keich v'yichot have divrei yesh me'ayin, like we say in Simon Chav.
So how did the kelim, the pearl, emerge?
We're going to say this, even in today we're going to talk about that. Okay, because the ikki here is not the kelim. The kelim is not the chiddush so much. The chiddush, as he says, lo yizu bilvad shakelim mebechinas yesh. It's not such a chiddush to say the kelim of Atzilus, even though we say iba chayu ichad, iba gamu ichad. In Simon Chav, the chiddush was the kelim are chad with atzmus. So we said haytachin. How can the kelim, which the dvarim mugbalim, can be chad with atzmus, with the iu? The fact that the chayas, the oiris of Atzilus are chad ma'atzmos, say that. That was easier to understand. The oiris. But kelim, mugbalim, how is that possible? That was our question in Simon Chaf. But now we're trying to claim that everything is a yesh and a mitzias. So for sure, when it comes to kelim, that's what we assume already, right? It's b'chinas gvul. That's what a keli is. We had to do a lot of acrobatics to explain how it was still ba'achtus, in a state of achtus in Eilam Atzilus. So, but now we're looking at differently. We're saying everything is a yesh. So we say lo yivul b'vat shakelim b'chinas yesh, which we can easily buy into. But b'chinas ha'oishel as the spirit in Eilam Atzilus, they also b'chinas yesh. And we can explain how the b'chinas yesh that comes through the simsumim and gevuris. A transformation which comes about through tzimtzum. Tzimtzum changes the dynamics of everything. And what ultimately we're going to say, what are we ultimately going to say? We're going to say, this is why the Eibush wants to create the world midas hadin. Tzimtzum is midas hadin. Through creating with midas hadin and tzimtzum, what happens? You enable there to be b'chinas yesh v'dov nifrat. But what happens then? The Eibush is completely concealed. The tzimtzum becomes so extreme that the Eibush is entirely concealed. And what we're relying on is that the yesh v'dov nifrat is going to have enough self-motivation to be able to be makabel alav malchus shamayim. Malchus shamayim. So it's a big risk. What's an alternative possibility? What's the yesh v'dov nifrat going to do? Be perfect. No oil. What's by an Eibush oil? That has to be an Eibush to Bechla. He said, "Yesh v'dov nifrat b'fnei atzma legamri." So if you only create with midas hadin, so you can understand why you want to create midas hadin. If you have the absolute perfect yesh v'dov nifrat b'fnei atzma, the Eibush is entirely hidden. So you Pasha have the only something the Eibush can create. And then when that thing serves Hashem, it's perfect. So unlike in the first mime of the section in Shuv Yisrael, where the goal is to put a thumb down on the person and make sure they obey and be very totalitarian about it, and that brings out, after B'chol Ma'idecha, a real extremity from, what we had in Shuv Yisrael. Here it's in the opposite. It's a completely hands-off approach. The world is created like a wild west. There's talking Eibush, no talking Chas v'Shalom, there's talking Torah, nothing. Nothing to inspire a person to serve Hashem. There's no Gilu O. The O is in the Gansam Tzimtzum O. The Tzimtzum is Legamri. So it's trying to show here what a world with just Tzimtzum, what that would have looked like. And even though we're going to correct it, we're going to maintain some of these elements. It's not just something. It's not just a whole building. We're going to build up, and we're going to knock down. We're going to build up a very impressive description of Seder Shtalshlus in this Ofen. And then what we're going to do is when we're going to be the shit of Midas HaRachamim is just going to be a variation of the system, an alteration, a correction. But the system is going to be the system. So don't think you're learning something that's just going to be thrown out at the end. Okay, let's do the bracket. Well, the conceptual bracket. So the first bracket starts from Shaharei, in my opinion, and finishes at the end of Nun Tes. So that's the whole piece. And within it, there is another bracket, which starts at the Yesh Leima, the beginning of the paragraph. So but I'm going to read them all together. Well, that goes until 3, 6, 7 lines down. Chuli, the beginning of the 7th line down. 8th line down.
The Vihine?
Vihine, yeah. So, but I'm going to read it through, and you'll see what I mean. So we said, it's not just that the kelim in b'chinas yesh, even the o. So now he's going to explain the kelim. The kelim of Atzilus are a metzias dava. In what sense? They metzias dava. We have the kelim have a name. They're defined. This one's chachma, this one's chesed, chuli. Im kein harim b'chinas yesh. That is sufficient for it to be classified as a yesh in a broad sense. But relatively speaking, they're not in any sense the same gather of yeshus and mitzias as we would use to describe the yeshus of Eilam Bia. We're still talking about Eilam Atzilus. They're b'chinas elikus. Again, canal, like we explained in u-va-Yom, remember? Yeah? The elikus. Just like the nefesh, the nafshiyim, koifas, but nafshiyim. So in Atzilus, the spirits are elikus. They may be elikus, but nevertheless, they're be'ein arich to Eirin Seif. Shesham, ein is shaykh inyan b'chinas b'sis klal klal. When we talk about Eirin Seif, and here we're talking about even the Eirin Seif of the Eiris of Atzilus, which is something we already explained in u-va-Yom, that the Kalim, the Eiris are pshutim lagabi the Kalim. But for sure the Eir, shlifnei Atzilus, Eirin Seif Bechlal, Eirakav, is for sure be'ein arich. It's not begeder chachma, it's not begeder all the gedarim that you have in the Kalim. So they're b'chinas yesh, and they're be'ein arich l'gabi the Eish l'mayla mimenu. Okay, so within what we're trying to describe over here, the Kalim is understood that not just Biyah is b'chinas yesh, even the Kalim of Atzilus is b'chinas yesh.
Comparatively.
Yeah, and even more than just comparatively, substantively as well. Because they have a yeshus in their chachma, and this is chesed. Because it's a whole chiddush to their elikus, right? From the Simon Chaf. So it's a chiddush because with having something which is begeder, a tziyah mugbul, how can it be elikus? But we went even further. We said the Eir is also b'tziyah mugbul, and is also elikus. But still,
In Shama as well. In Shama.
Yeah.
We're
We're going to talk about Shams. So the next paragraph, v'yesh loymar, and this I think is sort of a sub point within the point that's just made. Ha-hefresh bein b'chinas yesh de kedem de atzilus legabi yesh hanivr de biyah. So we just said that the kedem of atzilus can be categorized as b'chinas yesh, but not in the same way as the yesh of biyah. So how do we distinguish between the yeshus of the kelim of Atzilus and the yeshus of Eilam Biyah? What is how do we define that difference? So Aderech Mashukos b'makom acher hefresh bein hayesh de neshamas de biyah legabi yesh de malachim v'chein kol hanivroim de biyah. It can be understood in how we've explained somewhere else the distinction between neshamas of biyah. Not just neshamas but Atzilus, but neshamas of biyah. They're in Eilam Biyah, and the way that we contrast the yeshus, the definedness of a neshama vis-a-vis the angels and also all other nivroim of biyah. Okay, so we've explained that somewhere else. You can look up if you want to see the more be'iyun, more ba'arichas in the Ha'ara 600. You'll see a lot of Makedas for this Nakuda. But he's going to explain it here as well. The Malachim v'nivroim de biyash nishabum b'bechinas eisius v'kelim de malchus ta'atzilus. Ein zeh shebechinas o'elikus ta'atzilus nasa b'bechinas malach nivra chuli. When we talk about malachim, for example, of Eilam Biyah, so on the one hand we say, how were they created? So the explanation is they were created from malchus of Atzilus, just like everything else. The Eisius, Kavod Malchus. The Levush of Malchus, the Eisius Adibur of Malchus creates everything. Creates Malchus. But it's not the pshat that it was a transfer, that the Eisius Mamish became the Malach. There's a separation. One is the Beira, one creates. The Malchus of Atzilus creates. Aval HaMalach Hu Nivra. But the angel is a creation. There's the creator and the creation. They're not the same thing. If a creator was a creation, then the creation could also become a creator. They're separate things.
But it's not without the same substance either.
And the nivra is be'ein areich to its boira, the thing that created it. Shezeh boira v'zeh nivra. She'rechokim ma'od zeh mizeh. They're entirely separate from each other, distant from each other. So that is the nature of all things that were created in Eilam Esbiyah from Malchus Datzilus. And this created Yesh Ma'ayin, right? Malchus Datzilus is the boira, and all the nivroim of Biyah are the nivroim, the bein arich. It's the nature of creating Yesh Ma'ayin is that the Yesh is not ilava olu. It's not sibah masubah. It's not an evolution or it's a complete emergence of something fundamentally different to the origin. Yeah, yesh ma'ayin.
It's still made out of the ayin, though.
It's made from, not out of the ayin, from the ayin.
Not out of the ayin.
It's not a chelik of the ayin. It's a ha'ara from the ayin. Masha ein kein beis habes ha-Neshamis mikelim da'atzilus hu shemahus ha'elikus de bechinas kelim da'atzilus, and this is a very key phenomenal line. Hu atzmai nase bechinas metzias neshama. And we actually had it in the Tanya the last few days in the Kudrash Achron. Hu atzmai nase bechinas neshama metzias neshama v'ha-neshama bechinas elikus mamish. So what is a neshama? A neshama is a mahus of elikus. The kalim didn't create a davar nifra, something separate from it. It is part of it. The malchus of Atzilus, the kalim of malchus of Atzilus, the Isius hadibur of malchus of Atzilus, atz moinas bechinas mitzias neshama. What is a neshama? It's mamish, the kalim of Atzilus, or its substance, its substantiveness is the same as Malchus of Atzilus. So there's a fundamental difference between a neshama and all the other nivroim of Biyah. Because even though the neshama is also a yesh, to the extent that it's able to even enclose itself in a goof and be mischaber with the nefesh bahamis. Mikol makim, he bechinas alikus mamish, chelak lekam mamish. Achi yechelu lekabel kol ha'eirus v'agilim ha'yisrael yinim, which makes it into a keli for go heichin yonim. K'meish yispoid makom acher. And that was the whole shaila in Tanya. Why is the avanir of the neshama any worse than mitzvahs ma'asiyos? The neshama is also mushrish in the etzah. So chelak lekam imal. Why do you have to have mitzvahs ma'asiyos dafka? To be able to have a shaykhus to etzah. Surely the neshama's avanir is coming from the neshama, and the neshama is also. Yeah? So we will explain what we're discussing in Tanya. But he says, Havas kazoyis, she'alikus, and again, the same line, she'alikus atzma yiyah b'chinas metzias yesh. The elikus itself becomes a metzias yesh. Zeu be'ema zeu rak b'kecha ein sev hakol yochel. Only the Abish can do such a thing. Hu levade b'kecha v'yichel to lavid yesh ma'ayin. But not just yesh ma'ayin is ein zach. But the elikus atzma should become metzias yesh. The way it is in neshama, there's something lahafli. We don't really have hasbara what that means or how that's possible. It sort of breaks all of the rules.
But it could to become a yesh.
Yeah. The Zayah explains similar to the difficulty of childbirth. So elikus should be in a gather of yesh. So that is the end, in my opinion, of this sort of sub-point about trying to be magdir, the difference between the yeshes of the yeshes of the Kalim of Atzilus. In contrast to the Yeshus of Nivroim Biyah, it's similar to the contrast between the Yeshus of the Neshama and the Yeshus of Nivroim Biyah, as we've explained in other places.
Is it the same, just a little bit of a notch down?
It's not just a little bit of a notch down. It's enormous Biyah, so it's
the same thing probably happens for the Madrigas above it as well.
We'll get to that. For the moment, we're focusing on the Kalim of Atzilus. What does it mean that the Kalim of Atzilus are Bechinas Yesh? So v'hinei k'moishe hu b'neshama she'en mosa likus shezeu mi'atzilus l'biyah k'moi kein hu me'ein seif ha'matzil el atzilus. Just like what you've just said, Levi. So just like what we've just said regarding the shamas, she'en mosa likus, and that is from Atzilus l'biyah. So think about, so we've got Malchus of Atzilus and Neshamas of Biyah. They're both Elikus, and they're both Bechinas Yesh. So K'moi Kein Hu Me'ein Seif HaMatzil El HaTzilus. If we go up to the next level, the relationship between Lifnei Atzilus, which we're calling the Matzil, and Atzilus, the Kalim Atzilus Hein Mohus HaEin Seif Shenase Bechinas Metzias Dovama. So obviously the Yeshus of the Neshama is much more of a Yeshus than the Yeshus of the Kalim of Atzilus. Fi Erech the Neshama, the Kalim and Bechinas Ayin and Bittul Legamri. So if you go up the level, similarly too, the Kalim of Atzilus are the way in which L'mayla Mi Atzilus becomes a Metzias Yesh. Let me read that again. K'moi ken hu me'ein seif ha'matzil al Atzilus, the Kalim, the Atzilus, hein mohus ha'ein seif, the Ein Seif Shlifnei Atzilus, the Matzil, shenase bebechinas Metzias Dovama. Okay? So now we have that the Kalim of Atzilus are begeder Yesh. Yeah, are we really? And now it's going to explain a little bit around that. Ukiyudu, the Kalim, the Atzilus, Sharsham. We're going to talk about the Shadish, the Kalim Atzilus, is Mibechinas Harishima. What is the Rishima? The Harishima, Shehu Bechinas Koyach Agvul Sheba Eirin Seif, Shelifnei Hatzimtzum. The Rishima is the Koyach HaGvul of the Ein Seif Shnei Atzimtzum. So this is what my whole introduction of explaining the two expressions of Atzmus Ein Seif. There's the Koyach HaGvul and the Koyach HaBli Gvul. There's the Oir, which is the Koyach HaBli Gvul. And there's the Kalim, which is the Koyach HaGvul. Or what emerges is ultimately the Kalim. We also call Eisius. He says here, V'hu Bechinas HaEisius Sheba Atzmus. It's just putting all of the pieces into place now. Right? So the Kalim of Atzilus, the Sheirish Makir is in the Koyach HaGvul Sheba Ein Seif, which is the Eisius Sheba Atzmus. So sometimes we're going to say Kalim, sometimes we're going to say Eisius, sometimes we're going to say Rishima. We mean the same thing. Okay? A different phase. It's just talking about the same thing at different phases of its emergence, but it's the same thing. And ultimately, it's the same thing. Kalim of Atzilus. Okay? Kalim of Atzilus is an outcome, but its Sheirish Makir is in the Koyach HaGvul, is in the Rishima, which is in the Koyach HaGvul, which is in the Yeshis Atzmus. It's all the same thing. Don't get confused by the different terminology. Ukanal, and just like what we explained above, sheyesh eisiyes bebechinas atzmas eirin seif shlifnei atzimtzum. The eisiyes are in every madriga until the very top. Hu inye bechinas shmei yisparich. We said, hu shmei bilvad. Shmei is the eisiyes. Shu bechinas ein seif mamish. Ele shu bechinas koyach hagvul shebein. So it's ein seif, but it's not eirin seif. It's not the eir of ein seif. It's the Koyach HaGvul of Ein Seif. So you have the Eir of Ein Seif and you have the Eisius of Ein Seif. So these are the two components. The koidim shahaya tzimtzum, and prior to there being the
Isn't
tzimtzum.
that the Erev Ein Sof and the Zikilei Ein Sof? That be the same thing?
No. Here, in this terminology we're using over here,
Right.
we're distinguishing.
Okay.
Oir is giluyim oir. You know, obviously you have etzem oir, spashtus oir, oir shaykh la'asma, oir shaykh la'zulas, oir shlachat tzimtzum, oir akav, oir atzilus, oir achachma, whatever you want it to be. But it's in the category of oir. Obviously, in another context, something else, the notions can flip somewhat. But here, are you understanding what we're saying here? Good. The koidim shayat tzimtzum, prior to there being the tzimtzum, haya, we're talking about tzimtzum arishain, haya ha'ir ein soif, meir begilui al yidei oisius. What was the state of affairs lifnei tzimtzum? The oir of ein soif was meir begilui, kumuvan al yidei oisius, because we've already explained, efsha, key line, in from Amadun Aleph, in Levarova, efsha l'shum gilu oir b'li oisius. It's going to be a gilu oir, there has to be oisius. Because the whole point of gilu is to be megala to something. Umemela, but because the Eir in Seif was begilu, the Eir abligvul, Umemela loy hayo Eisius b'chinas mitzias klan. It was niskala al yedei Eisius, but the Eisius were not b'chinas mitzias at all. Just like we explained, remember in the Moshel, that when you have the blitz of creative seichel, creative chachma, there are no Eisius. Because the Eir, even though there are Eisius there have to be Eisius there, otherwise you wouldn't have any, there wouldn't be anything to be niskala. Everything comes in tandem. But at the moment when the Eir is biskalas and betoikav heiskalas, the Eisius are not nikorim. And the higher and deeper you go, the Eisius are not just not nikorim, the einem metzias klal. However, v'acharkach g'shayat tzimtzum, what did the tzimtzum achieve? Hainu, first of all, what was the tzimtzum? Shenistalek ha'oir me ha'eisius. When the oir was removed from the eisius, oz niskalo eisius, then the eisius were revealed. Because the oir was no longer there. Kavyachol. Umi eisius harishimu. So what was left were the eisius. And from there is netzvu b'chinas hakelim da'atzilus. And from there was created the kelim. Shein b'chinas elikus mamish. They're mamish elikus. Just like the neshama is mamish elikus in relation to the kelim of atzilus, the kelim of malchus da'atzilus, of the Isis. The same thing parallels the way it is l'mayim. The kelim of atzilus are mamish elikus. But the b'chinas yesh. That's what we're going to say next. But the point is, they originate in the Keach HaGvul Shemein Seif. Umikol Makim Em B'chinas Yesh. The Yosem Metzias Chachma V'Chesed Chuli. Ad She'ef Sheliach B'hem Ba'al Yodem Misavas Nivram D'Biyah B'chinas Yesh Mamish. They're not just Stam B'chinas Yesh. It's possible that through them they can have a creation of Yesh Mamish, not just Yesh of Atzilus, which is Kiviyachal Yesh, but Yesh L'Gabi L'Mayim Mimena. But it's not Yesh as Mamish. Talking here, you can create Mamish Nivroim Nifrodim, you and me. Tables and chairs. The sheirish is avusam b'chinas kelim datzilus. Everything to exist has to have the dvar avaya, the oisis hadibur, malchus vatzilus, in order for it to exist. The whole of shaychel b'emuna, yeah. So it creates mamish b'chinas yesh, dvarim nifradim. This havus b'poyel mi b'chinas malchus vatzilus. Not so that's all of the kelim vatzilus lefierach, but be'ikah the savus is, and the savus b'poyel is from malchus vatzilus. It's the shamu ikra kelim b'chinas yesh. The kelim become in a state of yeshus to a far greater extent in Malchus. And then it's possible to have the creation of Biyah. But the shadish of all of the Nivraim of Biyah is in the kelim al yonim. It's the kelim of Atzilus. It's because the kelim themselves are already b'chinas yesh. That's how they're able to be a shadish for the Nivroim. And how did the Kelim come about? It's because of the Tzimtzum. So we said this Avos HaKelim is from the Tzimtzum. What is the Sheidish Shoshan of the Kelim? Is in the Eirin Seif, which is the Pnei Tzimtzum. Bechinas, which aspect of the Ein Sof Shnei HaTzimtzum? Oisiyus Sheba'atzmus. Eloshamim, Bechinas Ein Mamish. There the Oisiyus are Ein Metzias Klal. Bechinas Bilti Metzias Klal. They had Tzimtzum, Nisavu Me'ayin Yesh.
Really? And the ish.
Yeah.
Isn't that Helen like? Isn't it that they were always there?
Who?
The issues.
We're talking about the Kelim of Atzilus.
Yeah, because the issues Shabbat.
The Shadish.
Because the issues Shabbat most.
No, they had Tzimtzum, then Nisavu Me'ayin Yesh, the Kelim of Atzilus.
Oh, fine.
But its origin is in the Oisiyus Sheba'atzmus. Okay, so we've got, this is Bechlal, in your Limud HaChassidus Bechlal, is a shtickle you should come back to again and again and again. Just because it's a gewaldige hesber of the state of affairs. And I think it's mamash. Here it's coming as a sort of a secondary thing. Whilst we're talking about Kelim, and it's going to help us a lot later when we're going to just to understand it. And it's already, you can see within the context of what we're talking about how relevant it is about the makabel and all these things, the mushrosh and atzmus. This we're talking about the same principle. But what we're going on to do now is that leizul bilvad shakelim b'chnas yesh. Kelim, but before you get on kelim b'chnas yesh, what is the nature of the yeshus of the kelim? First, we have to know where the sheish shosham is. It all fits in with our paradigm of what's going on over here and what I tried to explain to you. You have the Eibishter, Atmos Ein Sof, and there's two forms. There's two tchunos. There's these two patterns. There's the pattern of Gevul and the pattern of Ligavul. There's the Eir and there's the Oisiyus. Kol Zman the Eir is B'Teikef HaGilui, the Oisiyus are built in Metzias at all. The Tzimtzum redresses that particular balance, such that the Oisiyus now become more prominent. The Rishima, which is the same thing. And then you have the dominance of Koyach HaGevul. And then throughout Seidish Talshlus, you have this interaction of Oiris and Kalim, Oir and Oisiyus, Oir and Gvul. And we're saying, Kvoit Malchuscha, Yemeru Gvuraschit Abeidul, the Tzimtzum in the Oir is what facilitates this, the ultimate emergence of Malchus Atzilus, that you can create Elam Biyah, and you can have the whole purpose of creation. But you have to have the Tzimtzumim. And the Tzimtzum enables that even the Oir, it's not that the Oir is the same the whole way through. The Oir is transformed. The Oir throughout the Ishtash is transformed. But today we've only done the Kalim. And the Kalim is something we already losable about it. The Kalim makes sense to us because especially if what we've learned till now, the Kalim is perfectly understandable. It shouldn't be conceptually confusing. The Chidush Shebedov is going to be in the Oir. How develops Yeshus in the Oir. Okay? And that will be for next time, Be'ez Hashem.